target individuals, companies, financial institutions that finance and facilitate trade with North Korea. China, their central bank, has told their other banks, that's a massive banking system, to immediately stop doing business with North Korea.
So will it work? Doesn't sound like the North's taking Mr. Trump's warnings very seriously. Here's its foreign minister.
If they thought they could scare us with the sound of a dog barking, that is a silly dream.
Kim Jong-un also chiming in. According to state news, the mad dictator said, today President Trump is deranged and will pay dearly for his threats. So there's just a lot of bluster there, possibly, Jesse. But one thing that we did find out today is that after President Trump made those announcements, you did have China tell the Bank of China no more dealings with North Korea. You also had South Korea, Japan, even Russia, Australia, all saying that the North has got to stop. So it could be that Kim Jong-un feels even more isolated than he was.
Bad day for Rocket Man. I'll tell you that much.
Rocket Man is,
I think, a little bit nervous at this point. So these two things, the executive order sanctions through Trump and then the Chinese bank action, that's a really powerful 1-2 punch. The significance of the Chinese action is twofold. One, you have, I think, a huge diplomatic victory for the president. It shows that his tough rhetoric, by kind of heightening the level of rhetoric, is actually scaring some people into taking action. And it also shows that the Chinese are willing to take a loss in order to curtail their neighbors' behavior. So we still have more cards to play, though. You can still do ship inspections. You can still do a full fuel ban. You can still slap travel bans on the Rocket Man. I don't know where he's going. You could do financial sanctions against him, wine and cheese import restrictions that would really turn the screws to him. But the key point is that the Democrats taking shots at the president for this dark and dangerous UN speech look foolish, because our Asian partners, the Japanese and the South Koreans, came out today and said that the UN speech was strong and effective. So I think now it's time for America to speak with one voice when it comes to North Korea.
Yeah.
California's in the crosshairs. It doesn't make any sense to talk. The time for talk is over. And I looked at an opinion poll today. 58% of Americans believe that if economic sanctions do not work, they will support military action. But a majority of Americans also believe that the North Koreans are bluffing. So there's still a little runway left.
You know what I can't get over? That guy called our president a dotard.
What is a dotard?
Well, apparently it's someone who is elderly and someone who is feeble of mind. How dare you?
Wow. Way to get out the thesaurus over there in North Korea.
Nice preparation.
Well, I was shocked. First of all, I think I know American U.S. English pretty well.
Yeah.
I never heard dotard.
Dotard.
I thought it was like a play on words that he didn't understand, but actually it's a word.
It might have been lost in translation.
The other thing, Kimberly, is that when Kim Jong-un says that, that this is just a dog that's barking, the truth is that the dog also can bite if it has to. Let's take a listen to H.R. McMaster and get your thoughts on that.
What would be the definition of being forced to defend ourselves?
Attacks on us or our allies. So what is
an actual attack?
Of course, of course.
And I'm curious about that, because what are we going to define as an attack?
And on us or on an ally, right? So that has to be something that needs to be delineated, because it's a very good question, because it could be far more encompassing. And is it something that they're going to put down in writing, be specific about ahead of time to kind of set a bright line rule? I don't want to say a red line, and then determine, or are they going to determine it after and say, in fact, this is someone that we consider in this particular scenario to be an ally of the United States? One would assume South Korea, and given the presence of U.S. troops there as well in the military, that's obviously something that we would react, very swiftly to, and with fire and fury, as the president has stated. But I really like, just circling back to the sanctions, I think that this was an important economic step to put a little bit of a bite on North Korea, to let them know. And it was also an opportunity for coalition building with other countries to support the U.S. in this regard. So, and it protects the United States, so people won't say that the president acted with impulsivity or recklessness, that he sought some consensus, that he tried to go through the normal diplomatic, means by putting in the sanctions, trying to have talks until we have exhausted all reasonable measures, and then are either forced to defend ourselves or an ally.
couple of things stand out for me. Number one is the president's getting very good at letting other people convey his policy. So if Matt Lauer doesn't really think he should be president or says, well, does this businessman know? Yeah. Well, you got to say that to H.R. McMaster, an active general. If you don't like our diplomatic approach, well, Ambassador Haley's right in front of you willing to defend it. If you're not happy with the way the sanctions are being put out, what does President Trump know? Here's Steve Mnuchin to say this is exactly what we're doing. So he's orchestrating, putting people out there. If you do it when it comes to taxes, of course, you got a great OMB director. I think who knows this stuff backwards and forwards. The other thing I think is important is the president's doing something that's hard. He's putting in a lot of time. How long did he talk to the Chinese leader? Close to an hour. How many times did he talk to Abe of Japan? Over and over. He's the most active person. Now, Moon is the South Korean leader, and he's liberal, and everyone said, oh, wait a second, they're not going to get along. And he sat down here today and says, I've really gotten to know President Trump. I don't have the translation, but I'll give you the paraphrase, because we've talked so much so often. And next thing you know, he put in the time, and he's getting some results. A lot of times you would think a new politician who's used to instant gratification, who's CEO of his own company with his name on his building, would be like, why do I have to call this guy again? I just spoke to him. But he's doing it.
It's interesting, Jesse, because so President Trump hasn't been in New York this many days in a row since before the inauguration. It is a lot of time. Most presidents kind of complain. You didn't hear any of that, even behind the scenes. And so it seems to me it was time well spent, because President Trump is going to need to pick up the phone and call these leaders. And I think that having that personal relationship, the one-on-one, especially with him, means a lot.
Maybe Moon can tell him what dotard means.
Right, absolutely.
I think everybody wants
North
to know.
North or south, you can help us.
Help out.
The president has always been criticized for being this cowboy that doesn't understand politics. Yet, I think in the first 7 months of this administration, he's really established strong diplomatic and personal relationships with a lot of these world leaders, not just our Asian partners too, but in Europe. Macron over in Paris, and you have May, who we were just speaking to. President Obama really wasn't a people person on the world stage. I don't remember one leader that even comes to mind who I could say, you know, President Obama really formed a bond with this guy.
That's my favorite cocktail party question.
And
name his best friend on the world stage.
Crickets. But it looks like the president, because of his background in business, has really been able to, you know, form.
Well, let me just say, I don't think I just want to say there's a different view, I think, available, and it comes not only from liberals but conservatives of what's been going on here. Because if you look at what the Chinese said in response to what the president has done, they said his language so far not helpful. The Russians said this is engaging in military hysterics, and they don't see this as promoting. South Korea continues to offer humanitarian aid, millions of dollars, to the North Koreans. Again, that would seem in defiance of what President Trump is talking about, which is cut them off.
No, it wouldn't.
The president, though, I think, has twice big victories in terms of the unanimous decision on an embargo coming out of the UN Security Council.
Cost them about $1 billion out of their economy, those sanctions.
They could. Yeah. But what Rex Tillerson, I think that the North Koreans have shown a tremendous history of powerfully evading sanctions, making them worthless. But Tillerson said today he thinks there's already a fuel shortage taking place in North Korea, and he thinks you're starting to see some impact. But the bottom line to me is when you get involved in the name calling, when you're starting to call people names and then they're calling you names, it sounds like you're giving up the moral superior point. Right. And I think for a lot of people now, they're saying, well, you know what? Guess what? I think that the president of the United States saying, I'm going to totally destroy your country is going to be played over and over and over again on North Korean TV.
But in an interview, President Obama said the same thing. And Juan, your points are good, except for this. He has tried everything. I mean, do you remember like about a month and a half ago, he came out and said, you know, I respect this 35-year-old. It must not be easy to take over a country with all these elder leaders, with a lot of people trying to kill you. And was like, are you crazy? Why are you giving him deference? He tried that for a while. More rockets, and he goes, I'm going to try something else. Rocket Man.
Okay, so let me ask you then, Brian. Has Fire and Fury somehow strategically deterred this man? Answer, no.
Well, wait a second. I would see all of these brutal sanctions that are being levied on North Korea, especially this new Chinese bank action, as major progress in deterring their threats.
Yes, I would hope so.
And perhaps it could have a different effect. Like maybe he will actually act, and maybe we'd find out he was irrational. But Kim, I wanted to ask you one last thing. So throughout this entire week, we're talking all foreign policy, and we're talking complete diplomacy. Brian's right. The president is utilizing his cabinet and his people to go out and talk on his behalf. But you know who wasn't here? The military.
Right.
Even though I think that there's complete coordination. What the administration was showing this week, visibly for all to see, was an absolute diplomatic push. There were no military angles.
Even though they used to wear, Mattis used to wear a uniform and McMaster used to wear a uniform.
They thought that the employing the whole Rocket Man term was enough. They didn't need to bring Mad Dog into the mix to just stir it up. So they had H.R. McMaster. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think that was a good point. I think it was strategic, and I'm sure that it was purposeful.
I don't know.
It sends.
I didn't notice.
Really?
I don't know if they. I don't know if it was purposeful. I just think it was, to me, striking. And if it wasn't purposeful, it was brilliant.
Well,
but if you say to someone,
play your best players and put them out there to say this is his area, this is his area of expertise, and it's like utilizing, you're like starting five to make sure. And I don't know. I think it was good.
But if you say totally destroy, I think people think, oh my God.
In retaliation, if you do,
Juan is not
then
right.
I think that's,
I've never heard such language from the president of the United States.